If you need to drop out at any point, feel free to do so, and you can just watch the recording. So if something comes up, that's no problem. Right. Okay, so this list is what's new in this latest update. The stuff highlighted in yellow, this is the same stuff that I posted on Facebook, so you should be aware of it. But the stuff highlighted in yellow, I'm not going to go over in detail today. I'm just going to very quickly touch on it now. So we'll start with the first highlighted line. So VI reports now include completed by. The reason I've added this is because when we added the feature that allows you to automatically create checklists, of course, nobody was creating checklists, and all the VI related reports were based on who created the checklist, not who completed it. Well, now you can report on both created by and completed by. Part of Leo DAX request, which is the next part, was to add the authorized and unauthorized amounts of VIE to service advisor analysis. This is just a very high level view of which advisors are authorizing what amount of work during a given period. I'm going to go into a lot more detail about that in the other specific reports that I've built, but that's just a high level view. Rebecca Pullen requested that we add the marketing channel filter to various reports. So you'll see that's now available on the reports it's applicable to. For those selling vehicles, I've improved the vehicle sales reports quite significantly. I'm not going to go into detail because it doesn't apply to many of you. And at some point, a couple of months ago, we added a parts sales module for those that do some factoring. Again, it applies to very few of you, so I'm not going to go into detail, but there are now reports specifically for those that are using the parts sales module. Right, so moving on to the more detailed stuff then. So the first report I want to touch on is the fuel type analysis. This report was built to allow you to see the growth of ULEV in your business, essentially. So electric and hybrid, what the performance is, what the growth rate is of those vehicles for your business. But the side effect of that was you're now able to see efficiencies based on fuel types and average invoice values based on fuel types, etc. So some quite cool information. I've not analyzed it too deep, but yeah, look forward to getting feedback on that report. There is a tip. I'm not sure if you guys know this, but if you hold Control and left click, you can highlight multiple lines within a report. So that's what I've done here. And that's changed this line graph down here to just include electric and hybrid. So you can see in Lindley's data, there is a significant growth in ULEV. It's no surprise. Topic for another day, though. There is some setup and maintenance to do with fuel type code. So if you use the Garage Hive VRM, it's very predictable for us to know the fuel type, the way the fuel type codes are displayed. But for those that came from other systems, their VRM data could display in a different way, which ends up with a list of fuel types with all different ways of writing the codes. We've done our best to categorize them for you, but you have to search for fuel types and make sure each fuel type belongs to a group, because it's the group that Power BI looks at. So you can group them however you want. If you want to group them in different ways, that's absolutely fine. Right, so quite a popular request. I know lots of you in this room are actually part of John's accelerator program. You can now filter to this week and last week at a click of a button without having to change the date range. So in the latest version, very simply down in the bottom right corner, you have this week, last week. So it should help you give John the data at a quicker pace. Overdue service reminders. This was a request again from the community. It made sense. We have overdue MOT reminders. Well, now you can also see overdue service reminders. It's an indication of why has a reminder been sent and a customer hasn't converted to a booking. So it's just a place just to monitor. I'm not yet sure exactly how you'd use that, but the data is there for you to take a look at. As I mentioned earlier about the VI reports, well, we've also added the completed by user to the VIE reports, and this visualizes that problem I spoke about earlier. You can see here you've got authorized amount by created by, and now you've got authorized amount by completed by, and you can see these are different. So again, we are working on a more permanent solution to this problem, because we have some customers who don't auto create, some customers who do auto create, some customers where the advisor finishes the VI. So we're working with quite a few problems, but for now, this is the best solution I could come up with. It will give you much better data than you had before, but it's by no means the finished product. Right, so now I've got all that out of the way. Now we're moving on to the more fun stuff, basically. So hopefully most of you now are familiar with online documents and self-authorization. For those that aren't, I hope this inspires you to become familiar with it. We've been experimenting with it in Lindley's for a few months now, and I know a few people in this webinar have. I worked quite hard on these reports. What I'm going to try and do with this is explain what my brief was and then how the concept works. They're a work in progress. I've already spotted some trends, so I'm going to give my opinion on some of the data. But this is definitely a work in progress. I'm going to require input from you guys as you start analysing your own data as well. Right, so for online document analysis then, so these are documents that can tie to a job sheet, an estimate, or a VI estimate, and it's when a customer receives an online version of that document. So for reporting purposes, we wanted to understand what the overall impact of using online documents are to the business. We need to understand the difference between online documents that are authorized and not self-authorized. So a customer can receive an online document, but can still authorize over the phone. To understand the authorization rate difference of online and non-online. So if a customer receives a document, an online document, and doesn't, how does that affect authorization rates? To understand that an online document can still be authorized over the phone and the impact that this can have. So if a customer still authorizes on the phone, does a document improve that authorization rate of that customer? And of course, we must have the ability to filter data to individual branches and advisors. So the first report I built was one called Online Document Analysis. This is what the report looks like. This is actually Lindley's data. We don't have this live across all branches yet. We're running this at half the branches. I am a big believer in data has to prove a concept. So just because we've developed this and just because it looks pretty, it still has to work. It still has to improve the customer's experience. It still hopefully results in a higher authorization rate or essentially higher average authorized value. So if we take a look at the detail of this report, you're used to the way it looks. It's very similar to the design of the other reports. We have the years and the months on the left, and then we have certain KPIs relevant to online documents. A key point to notice here, though, is that you can filter to values approved online or not online. And this comes down to the previous slide that I spoke about. It's really important to understand the impact an online document has, but not just when it's self-authorized. So when it's self-authorized or still authorized over the phone. The key data on this report for me is the authorization rate and the averages, so average auth value and the average auth. We've got some July data there, but it's not enough to go by. So just ignore the July line because it's such a small section of data, it can't be relied upon. You can now view alternative amounts offered. So this was an issue and people were offering alternatives to customers and had no way of knowing how much they were offering or what the result was. Well, you can now see alternative amount is reported on here. From this report, you can actually view the status of the individual documents. And of course, you can filter to individual service advisors and branches, which again, I'm going to emphasize that later on. So some interesting data to analyze then. So how I've been using this report so far, and this won't be the only way to use this report, but this is just some interesting information I've seen in the month or so I've had this data. So I've been filtering between approved online true and false, and then I'm comparing the difference between the authorization rate and the average value. And then I'm taking note of how many documents are authorized online and how many ultimately still require a phone call to close the deal. So even though the customer's received a document, how many of those documents are authorized themselves or over the phone? And this surprised me actually. So only 37% of documents sent online are self-authorized, which means 63% are authorized, but probably over the phone. Could be by email technically, but it's probably a phone call. So our staff are going through the trouble of sending us an online document, but 63% of the time the customer is requesting a call back or we're chasing the customer. What I did note though was that this varies between staff and branches, so it's not consistent. It's not going to be a rule to your business, but have a look at that within your business and let's talk about what your rates are because it's quite interesting, that is. But this was really interesting. So documents that are authorized online, so documents that are self-authorized, 20% more of the work is authorized than those that are authorized over the phone. So if a customer is inclined to self-authorize, it appears as though they authorize a lot more. So it's understanding how we get customers to self-authorize and why that's happening. Why is that a thing? There are lots of reasons which we can discuss later on. That is consistent across all the branches as well. So I'd expect to see similar figures from you guys. Right, action category analysis. So this is another report. So this was built to understand the authorization rates for each type of action category. So for those that are familiar with groups, which I hope you all are, brilliant feature set. If you're not familiar with groups, please get familiar with groups, because there are lots of features that just help you use the system revolving around grouping. But one of the columns is called action category code, and this allows you to define the urgency of the work. So required, advised, MOT failure, service advisory, all sorts of stuff. You can create your own categories. Even if you don't use online documents, it's a great thing to report on internally, which I'll show you why later on. But to the customer's perspective online, there seems to be a very big impact on what action category code is used. So how the customer perceives the problem. It must work for online documents and non-online documents, and it must have the ability to filter data to individual branches and advisors. So this is what I came up with. So action category analysis is available to everybody now. If we look at what we've got, then starting in the top left, we have the action category type, of which there are 3 types: required, advised, additional. They are system set codes. They can't be modified. But what you can modify is the action category code, and the codes belong to the types. So for example, required code belongs to required type, obviously. MOT failure belongs to required type. So above you have, like, see it as the header, like a hierarchy, and then below you have the detail, and the detail is stuff that you can create. You can come up with your own codes on how to present issues to the customer. And then what's interesting is you can then report the authorization rate of the particular codes. So we take a quick look at some of Lindley's data. It's no surprise that MOT failure has the highest authorization rate of 77%. Advisory, so if we advise something, it's 24%. Service requirement, so this could be something like a pollen filter is due or brake fluid is due, 37% of that is authorized. You can again filter to online documents only, so you can see the impact that an online document has against a phone call document. Again, really interesting to analyze between those two. You can understand the rates between required and advised, but importantly, you can then filter to individual advisors and see which advisors are better at selling required work and which ones are better at selling advised work, which presents training opportunities and all sorts of stuff, which I've made an observation on the next slide, which I'll go into detail. If you click on any of these, and again, you can control left click and select multiple or select a single. So if I clicked on required here, it will filter all of the advisors and give me the individual advisors' authorization rates on required. So this is a general Power BI tip. If you didn't know, I hope you're all aware of this, because it's really powerful. But if you click anywhere on a Power BI report, it tends to filter the rest of the report to whatever you click on, which in this case is quite powerful on this particular report. So interesting data to analyze on this report then. So filter the action category analysis report between individual advisors and see which advisors are performing better at which categories. Now I know Leo's quite particular on this in seeing the difference. A room for improvement tends to be the advisory work, what the authorization rate is per advisor. So if you've advised something, as in it's not required, but we recommend you get this done, it's interesting to see how each advisor performs differently, and there are some significant differences. For those that are using grouping, you'll know that you can mark a line as dangerous. So, for example, let's say a wheel bearing is literally hanging off the car, you can say it's dangerous. Or if an MOT failure fails as dangerous, you can mark it as dangerous. So when the customer gets the document, this line is highlighted in some way. And for me, when we mark something as dangerous, the conversion rate is significantly higher, something like 80%. It stands to reason, because what you're telling the customer is that this is a really bad fault. You must get this done. But filter yours to true and just see what the results are. So a personal observation then, this was quite surprising actually, and I didn't expect this. So I was surprised to see the difference between two of our highest performing service advisors at the same branch. The more experienced service advisor has over 10% higher authorization rate on required work, which is significant. It's like if you take just the required work, it's a 25% increase. If we were to apply that 10% increase to the less experienced advisor, for 1 year's revenue at one branch is £20,000 difference so far this year. So half a year, £20,000 difference if one advisor was performing as strong as the other advisor. So it presented a very, very clear training opportunity. I don't yet know how we'll tackle it. Listen to phone calls, speak to the staff, just try and understand what the difference is, how these two advisors are approaching the situations differently. So again, have a look in your own business. You'll probably be surprised what the data shows. Right, VI estimate analysis. This one is key. So this is a report you'll all be familiar with, but what I've added to this report is online document to filter yes or no. So it allows you to see if a VI estimate, the differences between estimates that have an online document and estimates that don't have an online document. And this is important to understand not just self-authorization, but the difference, even on a phone call, the difference between a customer that's had a document and a customer that hasn't had an online document. So my objectives were to understand authorization rates between online documents and non-online documents. In particular, understand the average values, such as average VIE value and average authorization value, and easily understand the impact online documents can have. That's the sole purpose of these reports. Right, so my analysis on this sense, this is a personal observation across all branches. I'd love to hear how other people are doing with this, but I found this quite cool actually. So a VI estimate that has been sent via an online document has an authorization rate of 37%. So if it's online, 37%. If it's not online, so an estimate that's been done over the phone has a higher authorization rate, 41%. So 37% online, 41% over the phone. And I mean over the phone without an online document. So that surely means online documents are worse. Well, interestingly, the VIEs with an online document had a significantly higher value versus those that were over the phone. So an online document had an average value of £473, where without an online document had a value of £395. This means that the average authorized when an online document is included is increased by £14 per transaction. So even though the auth rate is slightly lower, the average value is significantly higher. And we know that £14 per transaction is good. We all work on average invoice value. We all understand those small gains per transaction add up significantly. So I believe in Lindley's in particular, the advisors are simply offering more to the customer instead of picking and choosing what they think the customer should hear. So you picture that conversation where you've got perhaps 10 items to present to the customer. When it's online, it removes the awkwardness. It presents it in an easy to understand format with images and prices that a customer can consume in their own time. Whereas to talk the customer through that detail, you could be, let's be realistic, a 5-minute conversation minimum of explaining to the customer things they don't understand. And by the time you've got to the end of the conversation, perhaps the customer's forgot the first part of the conversation and so on and so forth. And I think there is an element of my advisors are picking and choosing what they think the customer will authorize because there's so much to talk about. And this is the whole correlation causation thing, which I'm going to go into in a bit. So however it's panned out, the correlation is that an online document results in a higher pound per transaction. And that is a fact from the data. So my conclusion to online documents then is the early indications of that online documents will increase average invoice values, even if they lower authorization rates. Sending online documents will result in a phone call at least 50% of the time. For Lindley's, it's higher, it's at least 60%. Online documents should, if done correctly, improve the customer journey, offer more transparency, which will generate trust and cater to the younger customers that like to avoid phone calls. I am one of those people. To these particular customers, you are adding significant value to your offering. So the use of technology, the simplicity of the transaction is what certain customers are absolutely looking for. When done right and you're utilizing all of the features that Garage Hive has to offer, online documents can save time. Producing a high quality online document is a complex process, and it starts with your technicians and it finishes with your advisors. It's a big project for those that aren't doing it. Don't aim for perfection straight away. It's a project with stepping stones, and start basic and then build your way up, and then watch the data to see the results. But this endpoint is really important because I've given you some facts about Lindley's data, but they're all correlation. So you've got to understand the difference between correlation and causation when analyzing your data. So if you're doing any data analysis, you've got to understand that just because there's a pattern forming, you have to try and figure out the cause. So sending an online document to your customer requires a very good process and use of Garage Hive, using all the features and taking pictures and good inspections and checklist text templates and service packages and you name it. You've got to use it all really for this to work well. So for you to adopt online documents means you're going to be changing a lot of what is happening in your business, and each of those changes can impact your data. So just because online document equals higher value, there are lots of reasons between, and it's important for you to understand that as you start analyzing the data. So I believe that's it. So that's what I'll do. 25 minutes, that's not too bad. So we've got 20 minutes or so for a Q&A, then I will hang around afterwards to speak about any other subjects. So if you guys have got any questions on what I've just spoke about, I know I've just rattled off a lot of information in quite a short amount of time. But yeah, I open the floor to questions.
Can I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just so basically what you're saying, so if there's loads of feedback on this,
Echo.
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So the online authorization goes through and the customers are picking what they want done. Say it's like a broken spring for an MOT, but you're advising 2 broken springs.
Yeah.
And as a follow-up phone call, then persuade them to go in to get the rest of the stuff done. Is that?
Well, what we tend to find is happening. Core Spring's a really good example, and this is where I think John's input's going to be quite important here, because what we definitely found was that our advisors, particularly the less experienced advisors, would struggle to have that replace your core spring in pairs conversation, whereas the online document removes the stress of that conversation. It is a fact that you should get your core springs done in pairs, and here's the predefined text as to why. So it's a refined sales message to the customer, and then we'd find the customers were authorizing both pairs of core springs. Whereas perhaps if it was a bad MOT failure and there are multiple advisories, the advisors may pick the path of least resistance and go for the easier stuff to sell before the coil spring. So this is why I believe that, the value for us is significantly higher on online documents. I'm not talking small, talking £100 plus per estimate, over 1,000 estimates this data is as well. So it's a big data set. Now, of course, if you have a really highly skilled service advisor who's really comfortable to have those conversations, then great. But if you're not, this is a really, really positive start. And it certainly changes what the advisor understands in terms of don't place yourself in the customer's boots, present the information to the customer in a way they can understand and let them choose. And I believe that's what's happening here with online documents. It's removing the awkwardness of some conversations. So in the ideal world, your advisor wouldn't feel awkward having those conversations, but I have some what I would consider very, very good service advisors, and their average values have increased. I think it's almost human nature to have that empathy.
Just I had my mic muted there, and Laura was just saying that's the difference between her and Amanda, where Laura doesn't mind having that conversation, but Amanda tends to get a bit tongue-tied and the awkwardness comes in, as you say. So
yeah, there are two angles to it. There is super confident, you don't get tongue-tied, you know what you're saying, you believe what you're saying, and you get the job done. But there is also, from the customer's perspective, if it is a big list and it's one phone call and you're not presenting anything digitally to the customer to even assist the phone call, it can be hard for the customer to consume. You know, even the best will in the world, the best sales advisor in the world, if it's a long list, the customer can switch off halfway through that list. And then you, as a good advisor, you learn from that, and you'll learn that the customer's not engaged in the conversation, or they don't know what you're talking about, or you're just reeling off and you're boring the customer. So there is an element of confidence, but I also think there's an element of what the customer can take on board in a single conversation. How much information can a customer take on board? Whereas when it's laid out, I think they take on more. But I am all about the data. This is not fact. This is an observation of my data, a good amount of data. What I really need from you guys now is to embrace online documents and present this data back, because there will be the right data, there will be the right answer. Broadly speaking, it's not going to apply to every business, but the right answer will be there for us all to benefit from.
So can I just ask, Alex, so when you're presenting that, you know, for, let's use that example of coil springs, so should be done in pairs, and you've got one broken, would that be presented in your business as near side front broken, we recommend doing them in pairs, or how would that work?
Yes, we recommend doing them in pairs.
Yeah, so you give an either or?
I believe we do one red required, as in you need this, and then we also recommend this as well. So it's not we won't force the customer to do them in pairs, but we explain to the customer why, and it's perfectly logical. It makes sense. You know, as a car owner myself, if someone explained to me why coil springs need doing in pairs, I would have them done because of the reasons why. So it's just laying that out to the customer, and again, letting the customer decide for themselves.
Okay, thanks.
Right, do we have any other questions relating to this webinar?
There are some questions in the chat.
Oh, are there? We should probably pay some. Right, there's quite a lot. Yes. Yeah.
We did an authorization for a lady last night, and she said the authorization was a bit misleading, which I don't know if that's how we've set it up before, to be fair, but I recorded it off her, and he said your authorization is 03 required £312.46.
Yeah.
MOT failure, tyre, set of pads and discs advised on.
Yeah.
And then as it went through, the authorization that she came in for was the MOT test was at the bottom. Is that something we've done wrong?
Yeah, you can dictate the order.
Required at the top, advises. Sorry?
No, so it's a setup issue. So you can, required will always be at the top, and MOT failures should be under required. And then you can decide that MOT failures come at the top of required. So it's a setup issue, that is, which can be resolved.
Oh, yeah. My end?
It's your end, yeah. It's set up on your end. We'll catch up after the webinar,
Yeah.
Mark, and I'll get it set up for you, mate. No problem.
Okay, thanks. Cheers.
Right. Look. Feel free to ask questions. I'm just going to quickly read this chat. Yet to use online auths may be naive. Are these sent via email and or text? If both, can you see a report to compare auth response to which is best method of contact? They're sent by both, Ryan, so you can send by text and email. Text is by far the most responded to by a mile. I don't have the data on online auth, but if I take surveys as an example, the survey response rate for an email is 1%-ish. The response rate for a text message is about 35%. There is data online to see a text message is read on average, something like within 20 seconds, and an email might not be read. So text is significantly higher than email. Is there any way to lock a document after? Go on, Mark, sorry.
Sorry, another question we've had a few times as well is when we sending a text message to a customer for authorization, they think it's a bogus email coming through or bogus text coming through for security and a bit apprehensive. How would you propose that in the morning? Do you tell the customer in the morning?
100% speak to the customer in the morning, no question. So when we started doing this, it was a conversation with the customers each morning, just explaining what to expect. You know, and that completely eliminates that problem, but also improves the, you know, the conversion of it. They're more bought into it when they're expecting it. Definitely.
Okay.
Right, is there a way to lock a document? I found that after a document was sent, one of our service advisors looked at the price and changed it, not realizing it had been sent. There isn't a way to lock a document, but every time a document's sent, it's archived. So at the bottom of your VIE, there's a button that says archived versions. So there is always a consistency between what the customer received and what you sent. If you modify the document afterwards, which is perfectly feasible in a normal day, you could add something, remove something, discount something, whatever. So we can't lock it, but you will always have a copy of exactly what the customer received. So bottom of a VIE, under online document, count of archived documents, click there and you'll see what the customer got. Reese, that's not a bad idea. A pop-up asking if you're sure you want to change the doc as already authorized by a customer. That's a pretty good idea, to be fair.
Can you see the authorized document once it's been submitted from the customer point of view? Because I know that was an issue initially.
No, once the document's authorized, the customer can't see it. We know that's an issue. We do plan on, I believe what we plan on doing is allowing them to click back on the same link and see the locked document is the plan. It is a nice to have because it does work without that, but in Lindley's it's come up a handful of times in about 1,000 documents. It's definitely something that does need rectifying. I completely agree, but it's on the roadmap to be done.
Alex?
Yep.
Hello. Do you know when a customer authorises it, you have a note in the action box? Is there any way of notifying the front of house team when they're on a job that someone's been authorised, or let the workshop control know it's been authorised?
They'll get a red tile. So when a job's authorised, the comments for attention tile goes red.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So that's your notification.
But if you're in both screens doing a job for another customer, that we won't know that. If we're building that job and building it, say it's a big MOT failure or big service advice, how will the service advisors know unless they clear those screens down? There's no way of having that linked to an email pop-up, or?
We could potentially add an email notification. It's definitely possible. That comments for attention tile is the most important tile on your screen. So if that's red, that should be cleared down before any other tile, because that's where text can tell you a part's wrong. That's where payments go to. It's the priority tile is that comment for attention. So yes.
Sorry, buddy. Can I just butt in there? So Mark's comment about that. Sometimes the front screen, the tile screen, doesn't refresh quick enough. So unless you are consciously refreshing the screen, sometimes a tile comes in and you're not aware of it.
Yeah, I've heard about this issue. I don't know why that's happening. I don't know. It's not happening to everybody. Have you tried the Control F5 thing, which supposedly clears the cookies and improves the refresh rate? I don't know enough about
I understand that. It's just that what I'm saying is it doesn't auto refresh as quick as really you'd like it to. So, and there are ways around it. It's just sometimes you get people saying, oh, there's a problem with a job, and then you go, well, I haven't known about it, and then they refresh the screen and go, oh yeah, I see it. So it's just it's a teething problem, that's all.
Ours aren't refreshing at all. We've got F5 at every opportunity, both their computers. Ours aren't refreshing at all. We've tried F5, we've tried Control F5, and they're not refreshing at all. And it's constantly, we're doing it 10 times every half hour just to make sure we're not missing something.
Okay. Unfortunately, I can't answer that question.
As if that's the most important tile of your business, what you're saying, surely that should be made something, a pop-up box, an email link, or something to notify everybody the same thing then?
Possibly, but we're really trying to avoid making it more complex than the red tiles. So we can add email notifications. We used to back in the day when a vehicle inspection came through, front of house got an email. But they soon just sent all those emails to junk, because you just end up with email, like just emails after emails that just become noise. So yeah, it's a very conscious effort from Microsoft to avoid notifications, because notifications, as you know, if you all look at your phones now, they're probably full of notifications and it becomes noise. So we have to be quite careful in how we notify people about certain things, and that tile should be quite busy. We experimented with the VI thing. New Dustin Garage, Richard at New Dustin Garage, lots of you will know who he is. We created this feature where we email the front of house when an inspection comes through. Lasted a few days and we turned it off because it was just spamming the email inbox. So I'm not against it, but I'm just explaining my experience when it comes to using email for notifications. I don't think it's the ideal solution. Cedar Garage, so Kev at Cedar Garage, they have a screen up, and again, it is more money and more outlay, and I get it, but they have a screen up on the wall in reception of the tiles and auto refresh every 30 seconds. So it's just the tiles.
I see both sides. I see that you can't have notifications for everything popping up. I think there has to be some conscious thought about the process. I do agree with Mark in terms of possibly the email notification for such as online authorization, because if all service advisors are running off their comments or their screens, or they are involved on both screens, they may not necessarily see it. If the other service advisor is not seeing their VIs or their authorizations, there's a huge chance for a long period of time that that's not going to be identified. And if you're waiting on upsell work to fulfill in the afternoon, could be a huge potential delay in that. However, we get an email notification for the payment link, and that works really well in terms of all of our service advisors have the info box where it goes to, so anyone can immediately action that. And you do get the email and it prompts you to do something, and anyone can pick it up. Where the online authorization, because there's a severe delay in possible future action that's going to affect service advisors, techs, and the customers, I think that's quite crucial. And I do think some further conversation.
I'm definitely not against it at all. As you know, if it's in demand, we'll do it. There's no question. I'll always give my opinion on the experience that I've had with emails, and it becomes boring quite quickly and not very useful at all. But if it's in demand, I have no problem at all.
Sorry, Alex. Go on, sorry.
Sorry, Alex. Just one thing we've had noticed. We've had a good few customers whereby they'll authorize the work even before a conversation on the telephone, and it'll be all the recommended stuff. And when you'd ask them about the advised work, they'll say, "Oh, I didn't actually realize that was there at all." So they'll see the work in the red tile, but they don't realize they have to click the yellow tile. And I've even put in a text description of what to do, and they haven't seen it, or they just can't use the app. Is there a way we can have like a GIF video or something like that that can make it more obvious?
This is quite a point of contention in the Garage Hive team internally. So when it comes to UI design, you don't want overloaded information on a single page. I am completely on your side when it comes to displaying. I would like all sections to be open, no question. That's my opinion. The first version, they were all closed, and the customer had to click in each one to open it up, and then we reverted to opening the first one, and then they have to click the advisories. I think that is inevitable, but we have to be quite respectful of the UI and not bombarding the customer with information initially. But I'm totally on your side, and yeah, it's something that I've been asking for from day one. Unfortunately, it's not all my decision, which is a good thing. It's a balanced decision, but I agree that does need sorting. And I'd like to see the increase in advisory authorization rate. It's clear to see the data's there.
Yeah,
right. I do agree with that. I'm just going to take some notes actually, because Dawn's the one that you all need to pressurize because she's the decision maker. So she's in this meeting. Hopefully she's listening. Email notification, email note on auth online, and open advisory box. Okay. Okie dokie. Right. Did I make sense on those reports? Because I've rattled off a lot of stuff. Have you got the ability to understand what you're looking at now on those reports? I'm going to make this webinar public, this presentation public, so you will see the presentation. You'll be able to see the points I've said that are interesting to analyze. Yeah, you'll be able to see the points I've said analyze, so that will go in the community forum afterwards. But are there any other questions?
Alex, we had a customer who gave us a really negative review based on the fact that they felt the online auth was really impersonal. And
Okay.
I'm just interested to know, because I might have this wrong, but am I right in saying that your telephoned auth was a higher percentage, but the online auth was a higher value? Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
So obviously the online auth is very, very functional. But for people who've known us, let's say, for a long time and they've had that personal relationship, I'm just wondering how we can kind of almost marry the two to find that middle point. And I don't know how to do that exactly. Obviously, you know, feel free to give us a call or whatever, but maybe even a photo.
It's a brilliant
maybe
conversation.
A photo on the bottom of the auth just to give that personal connection. I don't know, but it put me off actually at one point because I thought, blimey. And I'm just interested if you have feedback in that respect.
I think the key is with that, and it was initially my advisor's reaction was exactly the same as that. I can't give the personal touch, but this is where it should enhance the customer. There is no need to remove that phone call, none whatsoever. If you explain to the customer when they arrive what you can offer the customer now, and they're expecting it, and they can still get the phone call, but along with the phone call now they have a visual of what you're telling them. They have the pictures, the price is very clearly laid out. It should just enhance. Now, if that customer doesn't want that, and some customers don't want that, some customers want the phone call, give them the phone call. It's not a rule. It's a tool to be used as and when you want to use it. But used correctly, I genuinely believe it just improves the journey, the overall journey. And if you look at other industries like the takeaway industry or Argos or any of these places, like look at Argos, used to go in the store, look through the paper catalogue. It was what Argos was about, and you go in and you have that interaction with the staff. Or now you go on the app, you pre-order what you're doing, you pay online and you collect. You know, it depends on the consumer, what journey they want to go down. But I think communicated correctly, it can't worsen the journey because you are just adding an enhancement to the phone call. You're making the phone call visual. So I imagine in that situation, the customer wasn't aware of what they were going to get. So they just got a text message when they wanted a phone call, and then just got their backup. Whereas I think I'm guessing, but it's probably quite realistic that if that customer had it explained in the morning, they were dead against it, fine, don't fight, we'll give you a call. But they may have even been bought into it if they understood what you were trying to achieve, which is we're going to send you a link. It's going to have imagery of what I'm going to talk to you about. It'll have the prices laid out, so there's a no pressure conversation. You can forward the link to a partner to get a second opinion. You know, there are lots of good reasons to do it. So I think that was probably down to the way it was communicated when the customer came in. But pick and choose. Some customers don't want it. Can't argue with that. Alex, they just don't want that transaction.
Alex, is there any way we can put at the bottom we've got request callback, have a service advisor name put in there? Or can we link the service advisor user if we've got multiple users like us?
It already does. It already does. So whichever advisor's on the VIE is the advisor that will get the request callback.
Okay, great. Okay.
It's linked to that document.
But my only follow on from that, Alex, was an idea whereby actually you have a picture of the service advisor at the bottom.
I think that would be brilliant. I really do think that's a great idea. Yeah.
Bring a bit of a personal thing into the auth.
Yeah, 100%.
They have two recognitions, one in the morning and then one later on who they do. So
brilliant idea.
Easy about developmental things, but I just think that would make the thing a bit more personal. But there we go. But it's great, and it's great function, Alex. Thank you.
You're muted, Mark.
It's a job for John Batten and his green screen, I think.
Yeah, could have John on everyone's VIE, sweet smoozing the customer. Sure, he'll be up for that. Yeah, that's a good point, Neil. Yeah, it can. I just think it requires explanation. You know, customers you know, we're all creatures of habit. So if the service that you are used to changes in any way, it immediately gets you back up because it's out of the ordinary. So that conversation really is key. But I promise you, the next time the customer comes back, they'll expect it. And they know that if they come to you, they get the visual of what's happening. And you imagine for the customers that don't necessarily trust you yet, that is really important, that visual of what is wrong.
Can you monitor NPS regarding online, telephone?
Not yet, but no, well, what we monitored was the NPS of the branch that converted to online off, but not of the customers that had online off. That being said, I think I can do that. So I'll leave myself a note, and in the next update, I will see if I can filter NPS score to online documents, which I probably can do.
Because I'm on the same boat as Tim. I'm really concerned about the online auth. We don't do it yet, and it's just a project that keeps sitting there. But our NPS is like phenomenal, and it's all about the customer service. It's all about the staff and how they've made them feel, how they've just, the journey was so valued because of the customer service that they got. And I'm just conscious of that online auth and just taking that leap and jump over to it.
I think that knowing the way you run your garage, you've probably got all the boxes ticked just to send this document. So you're probably doing everything required to send the online document. I would start by tasking one advisor to pick and choose a couple of customers a day and then sell it to the customer in the morning. Just explain what's happening, that nothing changes whatsoever. We will ring you 10 minutes after you've opened the link or 5 minutes after you've opened the link, and then your exact journey is the same, except you have images of what we're talking about, and you have a description.
You can see when they've opened the link and.
Correct. Yeah.
How does that work? Do you get a notification?
No, it's on the VI. It's at the bottom. You can see when it was first opened, when it was last opened, and how many times it's been opened. Sorry, Tim.
No, I was going to say, is there any reason why that couldn't go into the attention box when they've opened it?
No. I don't think. No, I think it's very important information, actually, to be fair. So that is certainly an option. Kirsty, before I forget, the customers can request a callback, which they do in most circumstances. So you could explain to the customer that when you've read it, press this button, and then a minute later you ring the customer. So it's just you can see it as an enhancement to the customer journey. And then I guarantee you'll be surprised that some customers just absolutely love it and just authorize. They just authorize the work without that transaction.
But on the flip side of that, how have your advisors find it? My advisors just buzz off loving speaking to people. And I get obviously still saying that you can still do the follow-up phone call. Has anybody had that feedback from the advisors?
It's difficult for me to say because I've not asked. I've actually got a managers meeting in a couple of weeks, so I'll ask that direct question and come back to you. But initially they were against it because of that exact reason. But they all do it religiously now. So they've learnt from the experience that they get, and they know they still interact with most customers. Where they get the real big buzz now is when they get that authorization overnight. So customers receive the link, and then at 8 p.m. at night they've authorized all the work, and that's a frequent occurrence as well, which is quite cool. So I don't know if you've met Emma, my sister. She was the first person that used it. You're more than welcome to speak to her about it, and she'll give you a very honest answer. I don't know what she'll say. But yeah, she uses it religiously, and she was dead against it to start with, because she believes in her ability to sell, and she believes it's that conversation that achieves that sale, which it does. But yeah, she's now bought into it completely, and she's definitely a skeptic.
Cool.
There are different types of customers as well, though, aren't there? I mean, just think about you, Kirsty, and like transactional customers, i.e. Argos, where, you know, in any garage, there's, let's say, I don't know, 60, 70% of work which is recurring, and then maybe 30% new, whatever it is. That it's always a 70% where you're probably going to have a bit of an issue, or because if they've been used to that personal relationship. And I think maybe one of the things we can think about is ideas, and maybe we should just suggest them maybe, of how to really almost kind of create that relational element within that, because I think it's a great idea, Alex. And we've definitely been using it, but I think there's that sort of element of us as businesses, which is the customer service and the journey, and making sure that we still keep on, keep that relational element going. And I think, Kirsty, I think it can be done. I think it can.
John had a similar idea where it was the top image, which is currently the first pitch you take of the car, which we train to be the front of the car on the ramp. John had an idea of it being a video of the advisor, as in the person you're dealing with, talking to you about what's going to be happening, what this document's all about, to add that personal touch. But
like
sorry, mate.
Like a Loom video.
A what video? Sorry.
Yeah, something like that, but integrated with software.
But basically, it's if you're going to have a quote, let's say for a big load of work at your house, they'll have a little picture of them talking to you, and then the rest will be the graphics of the presentation. I think initially a photo would do the job, but it'd just be good because there's been a lot about the data today, but which is great. But I think it'd be good for us to just, as a community, think about how we can really think about that customer journey from a relational point of view, because people buy from people. I don't think we're as much of an Argus as much as we are as that sort of personal trust building industry, if you know what I mean. We're based on trust, aren't we?
100%, completely.
I think it very much depends on the context of your business, like all of these things. It would, and something that you may or may not agree with is, just because we've got a feature to use, does it necessarily mean that every business should either use it at all, use it all the time, or have a mix of when they do use it? Because your business, Tim, is very different to Martin's business, which is very different to Fergie's and Dax. And there's always so much context, behind this. I've got garages that we use online auth with, and it works really well. And I've got others that, there are lots of considerations behind. When you think of, if the customer trusts you, if the customer used you before, if you've got a reasonable size estimate, below 500 quid, what are the chances of that being successful and you converting that work? Well, they're fairly high. Yeah. But if it's not in that situation, then you need to think about that context. And this isn't about, for me, I'm coming at this from a business development point of view, not from a software feature point of view. But the first thing I'd do is I'd have a look at and say, well, how is it implemented? Do we implement it, all at once? Do we implement it with customers that know, love and trust us first? And then try and extend it out to smaller invoices, afterwards? How do we kind of get it across the line? And I think that's the most important thing, because I emulate, reiterate, I should say, Kirsty's comments. We've got this to the point now where, Fergie's average invoice value is somewhere between 650 and 800 quid. And the feedback that we get in our Google reviews is, it's phenomenal. Everybody cites how much they like the advisors. And we use online auth. But when we put it in to start off with, we didn't. We put it in and we kind of pulled it out, and we've had to work out how it works for that particular business. And we've now got it to a point over, many months of tweaking and listening to phone calls, and most importantly, analysing where it doesn't work to fully understand where it does. And I think that's the most important thing for everybody, because at the end of it, we want to do two things, don't we? We want to keep the customer safe. And I think it's crucial that the customer does what we ask them to do. I personally wouldn't let them choose. And if we don't get it across the line, you've also got the element of, are they driving around in a vehicle that then isn't safe? Second to that, you can then look at the commercial aspects behind it and say, okay, well, if we're doing that, then is it working commercially? And we can look to average invoice value. But I think we've got both of those things, and it's just different for every business. I just think there's a whole load of thought. Alex summed it up, excellently on the last slide, and said there's so much to kind of get this across the line, and there are so many things that come in that it's really exciting that, it's really, I suppose what we're trying to avoid is just doing something for the sake of it there, and actually considering how we can implement it into our business long term for the success of the customer and for the success of the business.
Yeah, 100% agree with every word you just said. And this webinar has obviously gone off on a tangent, which was completely expected. But with the Power BI stuff, I'm very much just doing what people ask and then producing these reports and expecting you all to use it. The purpose of today is to attempt for you to understand why I've built something, which I'm going to do from now on. If you attend the next one, then great. But it should hopefully give you some context to the reports. But what you've just said, Tim, I am more than happy to do on a regular basis as like a get together to discuss the why, how do we implement something? Why do the concerns of something? If people have the capacity and the time to do it, I'm all for it. Obviously, it's in the middle of the day. I mean, I could do evening, but it's in the middle of the day. Typically, we get good attendance in the middle of the day. So if you're up for it, I'm more than happy to organise that, and we can dive into details of these concerns. Because it's very easy, as John's pointed out, Lindley's are probably more of an Argos than the typical garage, which is why I look so favourably on this. I've tried to demonstrate that isn't one rule for all, but it's quite difficult to do that when I'm looking at just my data. This is why I would love to see your guys' data, because, as I said, collectively we'll have a really good data set now. If you guys start to understand the data that I've analysed today, and then come to me with your findings, it'd be brilliant. We really could collectively have some very cool information and ways of doing it. I do like the idea of making it so they can't authorize online, so they have to phone up, or you have to phone, so it's like just a stepping stone in the journey as opposed to replacing a part of the journey. That's not a bad idea again. So but ultimately, to me, it comes down to data. Just let the data do the talking. Look at your data, look at online, look at not online, just see the difference between it. I'll add NPS. That's a very good point, Kirsty. I looked at the overall NPS because we went full hog, but it'd be great to see the individual customer NPS per transaction. But ultimately, it comes down to data. Yeah, as you know, I'm a bit obsessed with it, but honestly, there's stuff in that data that I wasn't aware of, and it's in the data. And then you start making decisions off the back of it. So
just one quick question before it ends. I'm presuming a lot of the authorization comes from the description within, obviously, whatever needs authorizing. Is there a stock of description, or is it just literally everyone just wings it and puts in as they're doing for their sort of the label lines?
There's no stock like the checklist. You mean like the text templates that I've done? There's no stock as such, because they're bound by service packages, and service packages can't be standardized because they're bound by labels and items. So unfortunately, no. That being said, I'll share our descriptions. I have no problem, because I'm sure you'll correct them and improve them and send them back to me. So I have what we have, which our staff have worked quite hard on, and I'm an open book when it comes to that stuff. So I'll share. Yeah,
it would be really good if everyone would analyze their data together, or we could share the data together. So if someone, for example, was only authorizing 10% of breaks, but someone was 100%, how do we compare and improve everyone in the group, just if we're all doing it so differently, but the same process, and someone's having success and some are not? It must be within that description somewhere. That is the trigger and help the conversion.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want, I think, the tips, if you're looking for tips on how to increase conversion, so my day-to-day work is looking at numbers of the 30 garages that we work with closely, look at who's not converting and who is, and then we bring in garages that have never tried, any development, and looking at how they work. And it's really quite straightforward. And send something out that the customer can understand the value of, be that, and in this instance, we're talking about online auth, then it's a non-negotiable to pick the phone up and to ask one question, which is, do you have any questions on what we've sent through? And it's a fundamental, if you're not doing that, well, what happens? Then I jump on the phone, and I look at the online auths that have been sent across, and then I listen to the phone calls. Because Alex is right in what he said, if the lads in the workshop aren't using the right text descriptions, then that doesn't give the front of house, the team, the ammunition that they need to work with. if it's not being sent out correctly, via email or online, or whichever way you do it, if the right work isn't being sent, then you're not going to get that across the line. If the telephone call isn't being made, then and your average invoice value is significant, which is obviously what most of us are trying to achieve, then the conversion is also low. So if you've got the lads doing their job, if it's being put on the online auth correctly, if the phone call is being made and your conversions are still low, it can only be down to one thing, and that's the quality of conversation that your front of house team member is having. And, are they putting the customer first? Are they asking if they've got any questions and continually asking that question to the point the customer says no? And then do they actually ask for the work?
John, to clarify, are you outbound ringing the customers when they've opened the link?
Yes.
Every customer?
Yeah.
Even the ones that authorize before you have the chance to ring them?
So the way that we do this, the development procedure is, if I get a new garage that comes on, we ask them not to use online auth, and we ask them to write out in an email the value to the customer, and explain why they need a timing belt. You need a timing belt because it's going to cost you a £2,500 engine. We don't do that because that's the final way we want them to implement it. We do that so it helps the front of house understand the value to the customer. And then on that written document, they've then actually got something they can base the telephone call around. So we use that as a learning process. And then once they've got that learning process, then we'll actually implement online authorization. And now we know, and we've got two things there. We've got a benchmark for how they were converting without online auth. We've then got that they're actually learning the process that they go through, i.e. the structure of the telephone communication and how they're going to show the customer that value. And then once they've got that, online auth then goes in. We know that the structure of the telephone conversation is good, and we can then make a good decision as to whether online auth works for this company or whether it doesn't. And we've only done this a couple of times because we don't have that many businesses that we work with where their front of house teams they're at that level. We've trained lots of people, and they're all good, but they usually a certain level of confidence to drop, a couple of £100 on your average invoice value. So once we're confident that the front of house team member can do their role, online auth then goes in, and what we found is that it works as well as email, but only if we've gone through that process. And as I said before, it comes down to trust, and all of this comes down to, do I trust the garage enough for them to say yes? And however you do that, if you do that, they'll convert. And we found that telephone call, non-negotiable, increases it. Don't get me wrong, if it's a tyre, that takes no thought for the customer. We need to think of the psychological place that the customer is in, and that, as you alluded to, comes down to their socio-demographic grouping. But if you look at a lot of the customers that we go hunting for our clients, so it's people who drive premium brands, and they're somewhere between 35 and 55. That type of customer, they like a phone call. Especially if it's for a tyre and it's in for an MOT, the psychological perspective of that client is, need to get car through MOT, it's £150 for a tyre, press yes, convert. If it's for 1,500 quid's worth of work, then that's in a different case, and a conversation we found kind of gets it across the line. And in some instances, somebody put in the chat, when it comes down to DIAG, don't use online auth for DIAG. So this very much comes to the context of the business. So I suppose what I'm trying to say succinctly is, small invoice, online auth it, kind of don't worry about it. The bigger ones, dependent upon the context of your business and how well you know the customer, there needs to be some thought put into that. But either way, telephone conversation always works.
When are you doing that telephone conversation, John? Interesting.
So your guys haven't done lots of people here have done the front of house calls, and we have a very defined structure to the day, which is cars come in 30 minutes VI, get the quote done within 30 minutes past that. So the vehicle's been on site, for an hour, and then the call is made, quotes put together, and quote goes straight out. So typically before lunchtime, in a business like yours, Tim, you'd have about 4 hours worth of work to do of quoting and DIing your front of house team to get that authorised while the car's still on the ramp. And we ignore everything else because there's nothing more important than keeping those customers safe at that point in the day. So if the phone's going off, we'll hand that off. There's nothing going to get in the way of getting those quotes done and getting those out and let's have those conversations with the customer.
Just a quick one. I missed a question. Rob, apologies if that's a question. Do you mean images as in pics, text take of broken vehicle components? Exactly right. Yeah. So if there's anything wrong with the vehicle, picture is very powerful when it comes to trust because they can see it with their own eyes, and vehicle components can look very rough. You know, on a very simple picture, you can look at a vehicle component and you can just, without knowing anything about cars, you want it replaced. So yes, to answer your question.
Alex, the thing that Kirsty said is, can we have a standard work description, like we've got a service package for disc pads?
Yeah.
To have like
yes, you can.
service package below minimum specification.
Yeah. That's exactly what we've got. So if a technician says it needs disc and pads, it adds a description as to why you need disc and pads. Fully so automated.
Can we have a predefined in that service package?
Yes, correct.
So where's that then? So I'm looking at now.
I'll send you the documentation. I'm not going to get that. The automation from checklist through to service package. There's a lot going on, but it is an absolute must use feature if you're not using it, regardless of online documents or not. It's so powerful that you have to start using it. What I'll do, I'll try and summarize a post where I explain about that, and Mark, you can just give me a ring and we'll just go through it afterwards. But there's a lot to it, basically, a lot of detail. Any other questions? We're doing all right for time, and I'm not in any rush.
Is it possible to see an example of a strong version of a online auth?
Yeah,
I'll try and find one.
What do you mean by strong version?
So obviously the visual of what it looks like, the detail of what it kind of goes into. I'd want to see a video of like the perfect example, or one that has been authorized, or what's one's expected to look at. Obviously Mark's doing the online authorization. He didn't know about this predefined link. So if we're all doing this, if we also one example of a really strong process, then ours doesn't include that, but ours doesn't do that, then about having the photos at the top or having the sign, the name at the bottom, then it's just a trigger for us all when we're all doing the same process, that actually we're all doing exactly the same, so we're all on the same ground. Whereas if we're not putting the authorization, name of the service advisor, and that's what's not getting us over the line, or if we're not putting any description within the labour service package, that's what's not getting our authorization up. I think if everyone could see an example of a strong one, it'd be good for us all.
Yeah, makes sense.
I'm more than happy to share some of the ones that we've got. No problem. And some pictures, picture of a corroded lipped brake disc is a powerful picture. Picture of a snapped coil spring and the rusty coil spring is a powerful. There's lots. You don't realize just how bad vehicles actually look when you don't know anything about vehicles. How bad just items can look. Your split CV boot, where it's throwing its grease everywhere. It looks awful on a picture. And you can't, how do you emphasize that over the phone? You've got a rubber boot that's got a pinprick in and it's throwing grease everywhere. Send a picture of it and you don't need to explain it. It's a very powerful picture. And there's lots like that. There's lots of issues like that. One of the things that we're in talks with at the minute is explainer pictures as well. There are some things you can't take pictures of, like timing belts or, various things that you recommend easily, but you can have explainer pictures that do the work for you. Explain to the customer what it is that you're changing. So that's something that we're in talks with someone at the minute. But yeah, Kirsty, I'll share. I always share what we've got. And Mark's point is inherently Garage Hive's problem in that it's really frustrating because these amazing features exist and people just aren't aware of them. And it's just a challenge by its nature. It's a challenge for Garage Hive to try and communicate all of this detail because it's not relevant to everybody. And it's not always the right time to tell someone. They've got to be in the right frame of mind to listen to a new feature. But yeah, that automating sales descriptions is mega. It really is. So if a technician says on a checklist it needs a wheel alignment, and that VI gets converted to a VIE, automatically prices a wheel alignment and then adds a description to the customer of why you need a wheel alignment. No one has to do anything. Price is there, labour's there, description's there. Anything fixed priced is just fully automated. And even the non-fixed price stuff you can automate, but then you have to add the part price in. Sorry, Tim, I didn't hear that. It broke up.
Is there a video on what you just described on Garage Hive's video training site?
There's a video of me getting excited about it, but I don't think there's a video explaining it. We have a full-time documenter now, so he does nothing other than write documentation. So I'll be surprised if this isn't covered in the documentation in good detail. If you guys want a session on it, I will sit down and go through from start to finish. No problem whatsoever.
For that automated customer description from the tech, is it the predefined 3 dots on the right hand side of the video?
Yeah, so they select the text. The text is connected to a service package. The service package is connected to a sales description. Right. So that's the order in which it happens.
We need to get that set up.
You do, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a steep setup, but again, yeah, it pays back very quickly. The time it took to do it is paid back very quick, as you can appreciate.
A timing belt, that'd be amazing. I know tech wouldn't. Well, our techs don't pick that up, but yeah. Okay. I'm going to go. Thank you, Alex, for doing this. It's really useful.
No worries, Tim. Thanks for your time. See you soon, mate. Cheers. Right. Any more? Leo's turned his camera on, so I'm sure he's got something to say. No. Usual.
So is the consensus that the iPad is still the best kind of version, especially for taking photos, the device?
I've not used an iPad on. I have my own iPad that I've used at home to play around, and it feels very, very good on the iPad, but it's a top of the range iPad. I'd expect it to feel good. I've not used it in the garage. We use Android. We don't really have a problem with Android. But the iPad seems to be the one that people are settling on.
Alex, what Android is it?
We've got varying Android tablets, whatever the Amazon special is.
Right, we've got Huawei's, and we're having massive problems with our photographs on it, and we keep changing Internet Explorer and Chrome, and we're struggling massively. That's what we've got, those predominantly. And this is the really frustrating thing about this camera issue. We've got the exact same tablet bought at the exact same time from the same supplier. One has a camera issue, one doesn't have a camera issue. So we just cannot narrow it down whatsoever. And the camera issue is not every time either. So yeah, the Huawei's I would recommend you just avoid if you can. That being said, predominantly we use them and it's fine. But other people are reporting issues. I mean, our technicians have to take pictures. So we score every technician's checklist. Every single one gets a score out of 10, and they have to add pictures if anything is identified as red, otherwise they get a point docked. Yeah, we also do that. The problem is that it's taking them probably an extra 4 or 5 minutes to save the pictures and pick the picture. And so I get it.
I really wish that wasn't a problem, but we are at a dead end. Trust me, the time we've spent on it, it's not through lack of trying. We just don't understand the issue. Right. iPad is in testing at a big site at the minute, and they've reported it's significantly improved the experience of the tech. Unfortunately,
we use the Samsung Galaxy Pros, and they're really good, to be fair.
Yeah, it's not an Android problem. I think it's a cheap Chinese tablet problem. But as I said, we buy the Amazon special. So whatever the flavor of the month is when it comes to the Amazon tablet that's on sale, as long as it's got an amount of RAM and a certain processor, we'll buy that tablet, and we're not really suffering too much, to be honest. But I know the issues there. I know it's a bad problem. It's not. I'm not suggesting for 1 second it's not an issue, because it's a really bad issue. Very frustrating when you're trying to implement a process like this. Anyone else? Martin, you've been very quiet. It's not like you. You all right?
Yeah, I'm fine, Alex. Yeah, just listening, taking it all in.
Just absorbing.
Because as you know, we're quite new to online auth, so we're finding our processes, and there's a lot of what's gone on today, which I'll take back with me and talk over with the girls and stuff. But yeah, we're picking our customers in the morning, explaining that they're going to get one. So, and I think that's going down quite well. And then have another conversation at the end of the day, how they found it, and just so that we can overcome any obstacles or understand those sticking points that I think Tim was on about. Because we feel that personal contact is what we're good at as well. You know, like what Diana was saying and Tim and stuff. I get that, and I see this as an added to benefit, and it shouldn't take away from those processes that we've taken years to build up with customers. So that's where we're at. I sort of agree with everything everyone else has said, but need to just implement it in a way that complements what we do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm sure you'll be sat there with your glass of wine at 8 p.m. looking at those Power BI reports.
I'll look at the Power BI, but I've cut out the wine in the week, so no.
Yeah. Good on you. Right. Any more for any more? We all talked out. Right, I've got quite a few notes I'll go back to the team with. Thank you for attending, everybody. I do plan on doing more of these with Power BI to try and get people engaged in the newer stuff that's coming through on Power BI. Excitingly, there's some really cool stuff that's coming at the Blend for Power BI, which totally new concepts, which I can't wait to speak about. So watch this space. But again, I'm going to explain to everybody the why it's built. So yeah, I'll wrap it up then if there's nothing else anyone wants to speak about. So thank you for your time, everybody. And
Thank you.
yeah, move the conversation over to the community, and I'll speak to you all soon.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.